Scientific method and scientific process. The scientific method is a way for scientists to be able to solve a problem or explain a problem or natural phenomenon. This removes human bias and opinion. So any preconceived notions that a scientist might have, or any bias that he may have toward one side or another, will hopefully be eliminated by using this process. It's a critical procedure that allows validity and consistency in the science field. So it allows other scientists to be able to reproduce their work, and it allows scientists to share their work with other people in their area. There are several steps to the scientific method, and depending on your source, you can often find varying degrees of numbers of steps, and this is just a basic list of the steps of the scientific method. The first thing that is done is observation and form a question. So an observation is just something that we find in the natural world. Scientists ask a question why or how something happens, and then try to formulate a test to see what the answer may be. After they form a question, scientists will do research on this topic. There are probably other scientists that have already done research in this area, who have already done tests and other information about this topic. So scientists will want to find out as much information as they can before forming a hypothesis. The hypothesis is a guess as to what the answer to the problem might be, but you can't really find a good hypothesis without knowing what the problem is and information surrounding that problem. Then an experiment is done, data is collected and analyzed, and a conclusion is formed based on the data that was collected. But it doesn't stop there. Scientists will also repeat their work, and after many scientists and many repeated trials, theories or laws will be formed. So when we're observing or forming a question, what is it that we observe, or how is a question formed? And this is just looking at something that a person would want to know more about. An example would be, why are the plants on this side of my house growing taller than on the other side? Why does the sun rise at a certain time in the day? Why does a feather fall more slowly than a bowling ball? We can ask this question, then do research. So, why do you think it would be important for a scientist to do research before making a hypothesis? Think about this question and try and formulate an answer in your head before moving on. Obviously, we want to know as much information as we can before forming a hypothesis. That way we can incorporate any already known information into our guess. This information can be found by looking at other scientists' work, by looking at definitions surrounding the information that you already have, finding out as much information as possible from maybe other scientists' papers, from other experiments that have been done, or just from basic sources of research. So a hypothesis, as many people have learned in the past, is an educated guess. But that's a very elementary definition of hypothesis. So instead of using that hypothesis, a better one to use, and that we will continue to use throughout the semester, is it is a tentative, testable explanation. So this is an answer to your original question. It's tentative because it can be changed. You don't know if it is right. You don't know if it is accurate at all. You are testing it to see if it is the correct answer. So it has to be something that is testable. It's an explanation as an answer to the question, and it's tentative, meaning it could be changed. We often write our hypotheses in the if-then format to make sure that we include all necessary information. So if I do this, then what will happen? What I want you to do right now is quickly jot down a hypothesis regarding what color of light would help a plant to grow the tallest. I'm giving you the choices of red, blue, or green. Do this now. If you wrote it in the correct format of if-then, you would have written, if I provide blue light for a plant, then it will grow the tallest. One error that students often make when writing a hypothesis is that they do not make an actual prediction. They don't make it an explanation. They just make it a statement, restate what the question is. So if you wrote something like, if I give different colors of light to a plant, then one of them will grow taller, that is not an explanation. That is not providing what you think will happen. So you need to select one of the colors of light and make sure that that is incorporated into your hypothesis as a prediction for what will happen. One thing that people usually associate with science are experiments, but experiments have to have really strict requirements to make sure they are valid, to make sure that it is accurate science. So we're going to go through the key things to good science. First, you must make sure that the experiment fits the hypothesis. If you make a hypothesis that says that blue light will make a plant grow the tallest, but then you do an experiment that all of your plants are under blue light and give them varying amounts of water, you're not actually testing your hypothesis. You're testing how much water a plant needs. So make sure that whatever you are predicting, you're doing your experiment about that. Second, there's only one variable being tested, and that one variable is our independent variable. So we're not going to want to vary the colors of light and amounts of water and the time that they're under that light. We want to keep everything the same except for that one independent variable. Those things that we call that are the same are called constants. So all other items in the experiment are controlled. There's not a lot of variables, there's only one, and everything else remains the same. Additionally, you must have a control group, and a control group is that in which you're using to compare your experimental group to. So I would have a plant maybe under a white light to compare the other colors to. Next, all data is recorded, analyzed, and organized for accuracy and meaning that you provide graphs, good data tables that are easy to understand so that other people can tell what you did in your experiment. Also, the experiment and results are repeatable. You must be able to repeat the experiment or someone else be able to repeat the experiment in order for it to be valid. When we're talking in an experiment, the variables can be either dependent or independent, and you will be asked to identify independent and dependent variables in upcoming assignments, assessments, and even on your final exam. So make sure that you are able to pull an independent variable out of an experiment and the dependent variable out of a given experiment. First, the independent variable affects the dependent variable, and the dependent variable is affected by the independent variable. Another way to determine this is that the independent variable is the treatment. It's what the experimenter is doing to the experimental group. It's whatever treatment we provide or the change that we are making. The dependent variable is what is being measured. It's the outcome. So whatever you would be writing on your data table, that is your dependent variable. When you're graphing, the independent variable is always graphed on the x-axis, and the dependent variable is always graphed on the y-axis. So if you're looking at a graph and asked to say which is the dependent and independent variables, you can tell just by looking at which is on which axis. Think back to the hypothesis that you just made about plants and light color. In this scenario, what would be the control group, constants, independent variable, and dependent variable? Think about this really quickly and then we will check your work. In this scenario, the control group would be a fourth plant that had white light shining on it. This would be a group that we could use for comparison for all of the colored light. That way we could tell if the plant is growing taller because of the light or if it would have grown that height anyway. Constants would be things like the type of soil, the amount of water, the time that the plant was under the light, the size of the pot. Anything that could affect plant growth, we would want to keep the same between all of our groups. The independent variable is the treatment that I'm applying, so that would be the color of light. And the dependent variable would be the plant growth, possibly height, or maybe number of leaves would be a good way to measure plant growth. Here's another, just kidding. In analyzing data, we compare the relationships between dependent and independent variables, so we can determine the relationships that they'll have. There's three types of relationships that you need to know. First is a positive relationship, and that's when both the x and the y values increase over time. So it gives you an increasing slope, like the picture shown here. A negative relationship is when one variable is increasing and the other is decreasing. In this case, the x value is increasing while y is decreasing. That creates a downward slope, or a negative relationship, like is shown here. Also, we could have a neutral relationship, in which one value stays constant over time. In this case, the y value is staying constant, but the x is increasing, so it creates a horizontal line. We call that a neutral relationship. Variables can also be related, but there's a very big difference between causation and correlation. Causation is when one variable directly causes the other to change. Correlation is when both variables are changing, but it could be due to an unknown outside factor. It is very difficult to prove causation when doing an experiment. Oftentimes, scientists just prove correlation, that something is affecting these variables, but it might be an outside source. For example, if you look at the lower cartoon, a new study found that Colorado has the lowest obesity level in any state. You know what that means? No. Forget dieting, we're moving to Colorado. This woman here is implying causation. Living in Colorado causes you to lose weight or causes low obesity levels, whereas it's not really a causation, it's more of a correlation. People that live in Colorado have lower obesity levels, maybe because they're more active. Instead, there's an outside factor that is affecting it, not necessarily that Colorado is what's causing people to have low obesity. Here's some other examples. Here is the number of pirates and the temperature, global temperature. So according to this graph, as the number of pirates decrease, global temperature increases. So that means that global warming is being caused by a lack of pirates. Not necessarily that these two are any way related to one another, but if you put them on a graph like this, it implies causation, when it's actually just correlation. Here's another one. Is Facebook driving the Greek debt crisis? As the number of Facebook users go up, the debt crisis also increases in Greece. Not necessarily a causation situation, but they're both showing a positive relationship. Baby's name Ava caused the housing bubble? Probably not. Is this mountain range affecting the New York murder rate? Again, just because they show a relationship in some way doesn't mean that they are actually causing each other. When you're writing a conclusion, you need to show all the related trends of what you can see. You want to determine if your hypothesis was supported or refuted, and also give specific numerical data to support any claim that is made. So you can't just say, my hypothesis was supported because the data said so. You have to say specifically what data showed your hypothesis was being supported. You can't just skip to conclusions. When you're writing your conclusion, you can use two types of reasoning to determine if the data is supporting your hypothesis or not. Those types of reasoning are inductive and deductive. Inductive reasoning is when you have a conclusion based on an actual experience, like an eyewitness account, an actual observation. That's called empirical evidence. The second type is deductive reasoning, in which conclusions can be drawn on inference rather than empirical evidence. So for example, I have a picture of a die on here, because if you hold a die in your hand with one side facing down, and you can see side 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's inductive reasoning. I can see that those sides are not on the bottom. But if I ask you what is on the bottom, you could say it's the 2, because that's the only one that's left. You can actually see the 2 on the bottom, but because of the evidence surrounding it, you can infer that the 2 is on the bottom. Try these. Which of these are deductive reasoning, and which of these are inductive reasoning? Dinosaurs have scaly skin, like their close relatives, the reptiles. Inductive or deductive? That one would be deductive. We don't actually see dinosaurs, so we don't know exactly what their skin is like, but we can use reasoning to determine that they're probably like their close relatives. B. Water placed at different temperatures only boils at 100 degrees Celsius. That is inductive reasoning. We can directly witness the temperature on a thermometer and directly witness that the water is boiling. C. Your mom comes home every day at 3 p.m., so when you hear the garage door at 3:03, you know it's her. That would be deductive reasoning. You didn't actually see your mom come home, but because you have information surrounding the circumstances, you know that it is most likely her. Next, we're going to talk about theories. And a theory is an organized system of accepted knowledge that explains a phenomenon. In order for something to become a theory, it must be logical, peer-reviewed, public, and also respectful of the rules of evidence, meaning that the evidence, all known evidence, is supported by this theory. Rather than writing a theory and then finding evidence to support it, scientists find all of the evidence that they can and then write a theory that is supported by all of the known evidence. It's public, meaning that anybody can read that theory. It's not just sitting around for only scientists to see. Anybody can read it if they look into it. And peer-reviewed means that it's given to other scientists in that field so that they can critique it, hence the cartoon shown on this page. Scientists can be very hard on each other, and the peer review process makes sure that only really good science and good experiments with logical conclusions reach the level of theory. Next is pure versus applied science, and these are just two types of sciences that you may see reoccurring throughout the semester. Pure science is the exact science of producing scientific theories, whereas applied science is used to come up with answers to problems. With pure science, there may be no practical usage for it, but with applied science, we answer a question in the natural world or solve a problem that people are trying to fix. With pure science, it's doing science for the sake of science, just so that we can learn more about the world, whereas applied science is driven by the need to fix a problem or change something. Pure science is often found in the fields of math and theoretical physics, where applied science is often found in biology and chemistry. We can often see pure science being done in the lab and then applied science being done in the field. So which type of science would each of these be? Development of string theory, pharmaceutical research and drug testing, building different types of rocket engines in lab, and using new rocket engines to travel farther into space. Well, pure science would be the development of string theory and building different types of rocket engines. Both of those are things that are just meant to learn more about the world but may not have a direct application. Pharmaceutical research and using rocket engines to travel farther into space are both applying to the real world, so those would be applied science. If you have any questions, feel free to message your instructor. Please scroll down and complete the assignments for this week.